Hey, everybody, welcome to Poduty in the News for Tuesday, June 9th, 2026. I'm Jeff Revilla. We're live at the Poduty Live Podcast Theater in downtown Tarentum. We've got a great guest joining me, Mari Reisberg. It's going to join us today, Sustaining Creativity Podcast and the platform. We're going to get into all of that right after the theme song. But Mari, do you know what time it is?
Ooh, it's the best time.
What time is it? What time is it? It's time for Poduty and the News. Poduty and the News. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. Poduty and the News. Poduty and the News. The only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage.
Oh, the only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. It's Poduty in the News with Mari Reisberg. Mari, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited to join you live and chat about the news and other things. I can't wait.
It's Poduty in the News, the only live news podcast about podcasting from the stage. I'm on the stage. Mari, where are you joining me from?
I'm joining you from Colorado. I'm just outside of Denver.
And we had, you were a guest on another podcast today, and a great story, a great background. If you want to hear all the details, it's over at my guest tonight. I'll put a link to that in the show notes. But Mari has gone on well beyond a trapeze artist into sustaining creativity, the podcast, the platform, and really showing people, how do I keep coming up with new things? How do I avoid burnout? How do I stay creative and have fun? And that's really a lot about what the podcast is about. Tell us a little bit about everything about sustaining creativity.
Well, thank you so much for asking. Sustaining creativity, it is a huge passion of mine, living a creative life. And creativity, I think, looks different for everyone. It's not only the performing arts. You can find creativity in putting food on a plate, getting dressed in the morning, how you walk your dog, how you drive to work. Creativity is everywhere, and we can find it doing anything. And that is the beauty of creativity and creative opportunities in creative spaces. So the work that I do is about supporting individuals to continue finding creativity in their life so that they can continue to experience joy and more wonder and curiosity in every facet of their life. My podcast, I interview people from around the world on creativity, what it means to them, how it shows up in their life, the tips and tools and ideas they have to share with all the listeners. It is such a huge passion of mine, and I can't wait to keep sharing it with everyone and all the listeners here today and anyone who listens after the live show.
And the thing I love about it, it's not just like content creators or video people. It's creativity in all walks of life, in all aspects of life. It's, everybody goes through these ebbs and flows of creativity, and sometimes you're rolling, and then all of a sudden maybe you hit a dip, and a lot of what you talk about really helps maybe level that out or keep processes in place to keep the creativity going.
Absolutely. The beautiful thing about creativity is it actually needs pauses. It needs rest. We need moments of doing nothing, which allows that subconscious space, our mind, subconscious mind, which is where creativity comes from, to be activated even more. So that's why people have their most creative thoughts while showering. We're doing a mundane task, not having to think too much. And all of a sudden we have those moments of, oh, I know this is the greatest thing that I want to share with other people. So we have these creative thoughts come up while we're doing mundane tasks. But it's also this opportunity of giving our mind a break, because we all need to take a break, go daydream, go sit outside, read a book, take a nap. it's so important that we find time to pause in the midst of our busy, bustling days that we all have.
I tend to have my most creative inspirations 10 seconds before I wake up. And then as soon as I wake up, I'm like, oh, it was really good. What was it?
Exactly. That's why, like, have a notebook by your bedside so you can immediately write it down before you say anything to anyone else in the room. No talking to pets or partners. We're just writing down our most amazing thoughts.
Yeah, I wake up, there's the cats. I'm like, hey, buddies. And I'm like, oh, I forgot what I was gonna write down in my journal. I got to go right to the journal, skip the cats. They'll be there when I'm done writing.
Exactly.
They always try to eat the tip of the pen when I'm writing. I'm like, hey, like, calm down. Well, Mari, the best way to find the podcast and to learn more about the platform?
So I am at Sustaining Creativity on all platforms. And then the podcast, Sustaining Creativity Podcast, you can find it wherever you listen to podcasts. And yeah, those are the best places. I'm quite active on Instagram. So shoot me a message, like, comment. I am Sustaining Creativity, so it will be me responding.
And I'll have all those links in the show notes, and over on the podcast page, we have what's called The Crew. So after this episode, when it goes live, Mari will be part of Poduty and The Crew, and it's all the guests who have ever been there. And Mari's page will be there, along with all the links to connect with her, all the podcasts that she'll be on, because I'd love to have you back on future episodes as well. And all that will get added to her page and kind of indexed as Mari's professionalism and knowledge on podcasting, creativity, live podcasting. And you'll be able to see that over on the podcast page. But go to the show notes, check out all of Mari's links, check out Sustaining Creativity, check out the podcast. Does it come out more than once a week? It looks like your pattern was more than just weekly.
Yes. So actually this month, I just started releasing 2 episodes a week on Tuesdays and Fridays. So I'm growing. It's great.
So Tuesdays and Fridays, listen to Sustaining Creativity. And then on Thursdays, this podcast comes out. So we just booked 60% of your week.
I love it. Amazing.
Are you ready to get into our first story?
Let's do it. I'm ready.
This is a great one. And a lot of what I do with these stories, I try to pair them with Mari's expertise or knowledge, experience. And a lot of the stories center around being creative, finding these new outlets, finding new ways to push limits and push boundaries. And also, how do you sustain that? How do you do that? And I love this first story because this is a 24-hour live podcast-a-thon. Comes to us from Lancashire. Lucy Baxter, she's hosting a 24-hour live podcast to support cystic fibrosis. Baxter, who hosts From Lancashire Lass and the Trust's official podcast, began the live stream at 10 a.m. on June 5th and continued through the night until 10 a.m. June 6th. The event streamed on YouTube and featured celebrity guests including Jenny O'Gutter, James Dunmore, and Strictly Come Dancing professional Joita Pristow, along with guests living with or affected by cystic fibrosis. The fundraiser was held ahead of CF Week, a national awareness fundraising campaign in the United Kingdom. And this is something, if you're planning to do, whether it's locally for some local charities, maybe a library or a small business, this is a 24-hour commitment. When you hit go and you say you're going to go 24 hours, you're locked in until 10 a.m. the next morning. And just a great way to raise awareness, I thought, and a great way to really be all in for the cause. Like they had to do a lot of planning to fill 24 hours, but they got through it and they did it.
Absolutely. The piece that speaks to me the most. Well, first of all, I haven't pulled an all-nighter in a very long time. So even thinking about what goes into the preparation, knowing that that is what you're going to be doing. So how are you not only mentally preparing, but physically preparing your body? And I think that's where creativity gets to show up, because what are those things you're telling yourself when you feel like you've reached your max and you don't have anything else to say? I mean, it's a podcast. I can't even imagine talking for 24 hours. on a podcast. I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy talking. However, I don't know that I could do it for 24 hours straight. But it sounds like having some prep time to figure out all the things that you want to say and want to share. But I can only imagine, what if something goes sideways? How are you going to, pivot and use your own creativity? But if the thing that goes sideways happens at hour 22 of 24, that you're going to be pulling from deep creativity to get through those moments and try and figure out, okay, how do I get us back on track, or how do I go with this new idea and figure out what I want to say, or how I want to, share this platform for this particular podcast, Cystic Fibrosis. And I think that when we are given some structure, creativity loves boundaries. Once we have some boundaries, we then get to play within those boundaries. And so I can only imagine how the host was able to really bring her authentic self to a cause that sounds like is very important to her and the other people who were there speaking on it, but that we get to really find that flow. I don't know if you've ever experienced, like, if you play music, or you run, or you paint, or you do something and you feel like you're in what they call flow. That I guess I have a curiosity of, how was she feeling her flow over 24 hours? And at what point did it disappear? At what point did it show back up? But those are all my curiosities and my questions.
Yeah, you mentioned like pulling an all-nighter. I mentioned I'm turning 50 coming up, and it would be quite a feat if you could make it all through the night and you're out there with the sunrise. But now that I'm turning 50, instead of waiting for the sun to rise and then going to bed and sleeping until 8 p.m., I tend to go to bed now at 8 p.m. and I'm waking up with the sunrise. So, some things do change over time. And, the time it takes to cover 24 hours, I'm sure there's a lot of prep goes into it. You don't just go live and, hope for the best for the next 24 hours. And if you're planning on doing something like this, think of the contingencies. Like, okay, what happens if, like Mari says, you get to that hour 22 and something goes completely haywire or sideways? Do you have a pre-recorded video you can throw up on the screen to get your composure back? Do you have a guest in the audience you can pull up? Can you take Q&A? So as good as to think of these things, that structure that Mari is talking about, where you lay out the 24 hours, there should also be some contingencies to that structure as well. So what if it does go wrong? What if these things that I planned out don't go according to plan? I got a spoiler alert. They won't. You're trying to budget for the next 24 hours. It's really rare to pull that off without some little hiccup, something going wrong, audio cutting out, microphones dying, power failures, right? All these things are out of your control. But how do you get around that? How do you plan for that? Planning for that creativity, right? If you have to fill an extra half an hour because something went wrong, well, you already built that structure and the rules of the game in order to play within that 30-minute structure.
Absolutely.
Well, let's keep it moving. Let's go over to our next story, number 2. We're going to journalist Annie Lowrey and podcast host Ezra Klein are scheduled to appear live as part of the City Arts and Lecture Series. The event will focus on Lowrey's new book, The Time Tax: How Government Wastes Our Time and How to Fix It. Lowrey is known for her reporting on economics and politics for publications including The Atlantic, The New York Times, and New York Magazine. Klein is the host of The Ezra Klein Show and a writer for The New York Times. The conversation will be recorded for the City and Arts Lectures podcast and will also air on public radio. Attendees can purchase tickets with some ticket packages including a copy of Lowrey's new book.
My goodness. This, I love the podcast theme. That's so great. That the idea behind, you know, the interview being on a podcast. I think we're so used to having interviews happen on talk shows, on a television set, and not necessarily on a podcast or without a video attached. And I don't know if they have a video attached. Many podcasts do these days, but the just, you know, how does one talk about an entire book in bite-sized moments? That is, I think, a skill first. But to share the most salient pieces without giving away the whole package so that you're still marketing something so that people will then buy your book. So making it interesting enough to draw in a listener to then who would want to tune in and then continue to buy it. I think there's so much creativity that goes into that. I'm really fascinated by people who can take a whole, for example, take a book and turn it into bite-sized chunks that are insightful, intriguing, make you want more, and yet and then present it in, you know, however long the podcast is, along with many other things that people are talking about. And then to ask the appropriate questions to elicit that information from your guest and someone you may or may not have a relationship with. I think that is such a skill in creative listening and creative relating. I think there's so much creativity that shows up in relationships and how we talk and listen to other people and how we just relate to someone else that we're sharing space with, whether it's a virtual or literal space. So so many curiosities about this and how it shows up and the creativity behind that. I really think, you know, there's like knowing yourself, I think, is an important aspect of creativity, an important piece that allows us to really share that with other people. It's when we're kind of putting identity together and it hasn't fully formed yet that we get a little stuck in our creativity. So those are my thoughts.
I love it. And I love that, like, this event has this multiplier effect. There's many things happening. One, it's a book tour, whereas we talked about, you know, authors would go on morning radio or morning TV shows or do interviews in newspapers or magazines. But here's an event. It's a live event with the author where they're selling tickets. And so one, they're still promoting their book, but they're getting people to pay them. They're selling tickets to this event. And then because it's being recorded and distributed, this is the multiplier I think that I like about this is this third party, the City Arts and Lecture Series, is recording the event for their own channel, for their own members, that they're going to broadcast that. So the thing that you created one time, it's getting multiplied many, many times over through that network of the City Arts and Lectures. So you're getting like a double whammy here. You're promoting the book, you're selling tickets, and in some cases, some of those people who come to see that author may have already bought the book, and now they're going to pay another $20, $25 to see the author. You just sold that book twice. So, you know, from a business perspective, for me, like, I'm looking at this, I'm like, oh, wait a second, this is a great strategy for creators. You know, if you've created something one time, the book, now you have a live event, and now you're recording it for a TV and radio show for the station. This is like hitting a home run. I think is the best way to compare it.
Absolutely, you're on it for sure.
The business guy, everything. We were going out for a steak dinner for my birthday, and I'm already planning on breaking down the actual cost of every item. And like, hey, look, this is pretty expensive for what this is. You know?
I love it. I love the business, because that isn't where my brain first goes to. Clearly, it goes to the creativity that goes into it all.
Yeah, and that's what makes conversations like this so great, because we're getting two different perspectives. You're seeing, or you're saying about how can we put this together? What goes
Mhm.
behind this? Why? What would draw somebody to come see that? What's the individual? Like you're
Yeah.
saying, it's the perspective from the author, and the people are paying to come see that. And I'm saying, hey, this is, if you love being creative, this is also a sustainable way
Right.
to live your life. So you can blend that creativity with having a great business model that's a great exchange. Some people feel icky, like, oh, I'm selling my information, or I'm selling my book, or but that's a great night of exchange between you and the audience. The audience likes what you're creating. They want to come see you, and they're supporting you. So they're getting this one-on-one experience that's once in a lifetime, that you don't get that unless you're in that room. And that's the part of this that I love is, what is that business side to being creative? How can we just do what we love and share our love with what we do with other people?
Yeah. Let's do more of that.
Well, here's another book one. Here's being creative, writing books. That's a very long process to do that. And this comes from the former Survivor contestant Christian Hubicki. Recently hosted a live interview with podcast host and author Rob Cesternino at a sold-out Barnes & Noble event in Los Angeles. The event celebrated the release of, they're going to get me on that, we'll call it Rob's New York Times best-selling book, The Tribe Has Spoken. During the conversation, the two discussed the process of writing the book, Rob's journey from Survivor contestant to full-time podcaster, and the growth of RHAP community. Audience members also participated in a question and answer session covering topics related to Survivor, podcasting, and fan communities.
My goodness. That is a jam-packed event. So much going on with it. Talk about entertaining. And I think the piece of like creativity that we often bypass or don't view as being creative is witnessing others' creativity. And I think we can find so much inspiration by attending events such as this, or reading someone's book, or watching their journey from contestant on a reality show to podcaster, what that journey was for them, and find inspiration for your own life, for your own job or career that you're engaged in. But the idea that witnessing someone else's creativity can impact us in similar ways to expressing our own creativity. I think we often forget that piece. So it's just as important to go witness someone else's creativity as it is for us to express our own. And I think that you really see that in this article of like the people not only attending the event, but participating in the event and experiencing bits and pieces of the things that the host and the guest want to share with someone. So I love that aspect of creativity and being really inspired by other people to kind of recharge your own creative spark.
Yeah, a lot of times that witnessing is the inspiration for the next iteration of what you're passionate about. If somebody's coming to see you and they walk out of there feeling inspired, and as Tony Robbins would say, they're juiced, right? They're juiced up. they're excited. They have new inspiration. They're tingling. They're like, I'm going to go do this thing. And it's almost like that butterfly effect, because you did this one little thing on stage. It influenced this one person to do this one other thing that inspired somebody else, all from that one little event. And you get that by being you, by being who you are, finding, as this case, your tribe, like the Survivor tribe, and being the person that they came to see, just being authentically you and sharing your stories, sharing your passions. And hopefully those little things send out little sparks into the audience and inspire people to do more.
Absolutely. It's a great like chain of sparks to create more creative inspiration in the world.
We'll call it episode or story number 3 is Chain of Sparks. I love it. We're going to still stick with endurance. And I love this story. This is about making a career out of something, doing it for a long term and being one of the best at it. And a live podcast was recently recorded at the Rad Race Shop in Hamburg, featuring Ironman world champion Laura Philipp. Hosted by Ingo alongside Fritz and Julie from Canyon Rad Pack, the event took place 2 days before Ironman Hamburg. During the conversation, Philipp discussed her athletic career, training journey, business ventures, race preparation, and life outside the competition. The live audience also heard stories about her transition from learning to swim as an adult to becoming a world champion triathlete, as well as discussions about nutrition, entrepreneurship, and the realities of professional endurance sports.
Whew, my goodness. Endurance sports. What an intense world. But the piece of that article and that story that really sparks me is that they talked about life outside endurance sports, life outside the triathlete that they are, because I think that is such an important thing for people who turn passions into career. And especially in the world of creativity, if your creative juice or passion, it becomes career, I think for many people, it starts to lose a little bit of its luster for them when you're getting a paycheck for it. Not for everyone. For some people, they are so grateful and so in tune and in step with their creativity. But still having something outside of what career you are engaging in to reignite or spark your own creative life force to keep that career creativity going. I mean, when we're talking about elite performers in any industry, there is so much dedication, time spent, choices made to do the elite thing that you have worked countless hours towards. It's how are we still giving some time to be human and to recharge in any industry? It doesn't matter if you're an athlete or performer or an executive, you're still needing that recharge time for your nervous system to reactivate into showing up in your life and the career path that you've chosen. So I'm really struck. I really appreciate that they asked the athlete about kind of life outside and what that looks like and how, when we turn passion into a career, lots of things can change and get in our way. So remembering those pieces outside of that space that keep us grounded, keep us in touch with our humanness along the way is so important.
And she's not just great at one sport, and she's excelling in 3 as a triathlete. So to have that downtime, that break, let your brain reset. Because when you become like a physical athlete, and don't just don't listen to me as talking about the peak athletic prowess, but there's muscle memory. There's things that you repeat over and over again, and to be the best that you can. And sometimes, like Mari's saying, stepping back from that lets all that sink in and settle down and become more solid, so that when you go back and do it, you can repeat it a little bit better, and your head's a little bit clearer. You're a little more focused because you have that distance. Sometimes it's like I'm a different person on stage, people tell me, and then I get off stage, I sit in the corner and I don't talk to anybody. It's a skill that you learn. It's something that you build up over time. And you do that so that you can do the thing you love. Like, I love live podcasting. I love doing this on stage, but I don't want to talk to people. Like, I want to go hide in the corner. You can see over on the side there, I got a curtain over there. And that's where I usually hide when I'm producing shows. And it's okay to have that switch to go from professional triathlete, to having a life at home. A lot of people are into sourdough starters, right? So maybe baking is her thing. She likes to make sourdough bread, or something. There's always something else that you can do that lets your brain settle, so that you can focus later on the thing that you love to do.
Absolutely, yeah.
And one of the things I love to do, it's go into the local pub. And this is the Pub Crawlers podcast. They record inside local pubs across the UK. And the Anfield Wrap was released, the second episode of its new podcast, the Pub Crawlers podcast. The episode was recorded on location inside a Liverpool pub and features host Rob Gutman alongside guests Steve Graves and Adam Malia. Rather than focusing on a specific topic, the conversation covers a variety of subjects, including pub culture, everyday observations, music, and personal stories. The series is filmed and recorded inside pubs throughout the United Kingdom and Ireland, and the first season visiting locations in Liverpool, Manchester, Sheffield, Chester, and Nottingham. Each episode combines discussions about pub life with conversations that develop naturally among friends around the table. And just to kind of build on this is kind of that downtime we're talking about. Like, how do we pull back and do something else? How do we reset? How do we recenter, refocus? And I think this story was great. There's a lot of what Mari talks about.
Absolutely. And I love that it's in a pub, and creativity gets to be found everywhere and anywhere. And that just the pub culture in the UK, and that is such a fun experience, and it's so nuanced too. There's so many bits and pieces and corners to uncover and experience, and I love the kind of normal, I guess normal in air quotes, normal experience of having a local pub to go to, where you're seeing people people you don't know, and what that brings to your experience of pub culture and the life it lives beyond. I lived in England for a short amount of time, and we had our local pub that we would go to called the Bear and Staff in Birmingham, and it was a whole world unto itself that you kind of walked into, and everything else ceased to exist, your worries, your problems, and you had a whole kind of experience and culture and world that you got to step into for however long you were there. And that, as you were saying, the kind of just having that downtime to process and shake off anything that needs shaking off.
Yeah, grab a pint, get some bangers and mash, and let's listen to a podcast. And also, this is a local thing. This is something that's happening in your neighborhood. And if you're sitting around like, oh, I wonder what I could do for a night. Well, we've covered stories already where authors are presenting their books, podcasters are going to pubs. We're doing fundraisers, for businesses, communities, and charities. And these things are all happening in all of our backyards. Even though I'm talking about this from the stage here in Pittsburgh and Mari's in Colorado, these things that we're talking about are happening all over the world. And we had Germany, we had England, we had I think one other place too as well. These are international stories. They're happening in the States, and they're happening across the globe. So how can you go out, support those creators who are local to you, local to your town? They're supporting the things in your town. How do you find them? Go online and try to find a thing to do. The night out might only cost you like $10 or $15.
It's a pretty sweet deal.
And our last story, I snuck a Pittsburgh one in, but this one also has a lot of longevity and a ton of creativity. The Comedy Bang Bang podcast, that they were here with their ground beefing tour in Pittsburgh on June 4th. Host Scott Aukerman and rotating cast of comedians brought the long-running podcast to a live audience. Ahead of the performance, Ackerman spoke with local media about the tour, explaining the name ground beefing originating from an inside joke that developed during podcast recordings with comedian Paul F. Tompkins. Ackerman also discussed the show's improvisational format, noting that performers typically enter with only character names and basic descriptions, while the rest of the show is created live on stage. The tour adapts the podcast talk show format into a live theatrical experience for audiences across multiple cities.
Oh my gosh, love, love, love this concept and have it. I love participating in it and I love viewing it and being an audience member of these types of things because I think it offers so many wonderful ways to stay curious, be entertained, be in awe of. I don't know if viewers and listeners have ever been to an improv show where these people are making it up in the moment. That is awe-inspiring to me, that they're given a brief description and a name and then off they go. And whatever comes out is highly entertaining. And I love the like invitation to participate in this way as a viewer or even as a local participant or a tour participant. If they're, I'm wondering, I imagine they get new characters every show, so it doesn't feel old. And
speaking of old, I saw one with John Mulaney on Comedy Bang Bang, where he was an old man, like hard of hearing, and just talking about like doctor's appointments and scheduling early. It doesn't want to be late in the day, and as from a creative standpoint, John Mulaney is a very well established comedian, very successful. Has filled theaters and arenas, and here he is on this podcast, coming out in a character he probably thought of, one night, maybe off stage, or ran into somebody who inspired him to create this character. He gets to play that out as that character on this podcast for the hour and a half. And I love how creative this podcast was. And if you were the person that got to go on in character and pretend to be somebody else, that was probably the most creative story I found in this batch of 6.
Yeah. To find the inner character, whether it's someone or you're basing them off of someone you saw, or some part of yourself that feels that way. Maybe John Mulaney has that old part that feels like he only wants to schedule appointments in the morning or afternoon.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of truth in every character.
Exactly.
Well, Mari, I warned you, this goes by so fast. We've already done our 6 stories already. And this is the part of the show I turn the entire floor over to you for one last time. You can plug, promote, talk about anything you'd like. Mari, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for inviting me to join you here tonight on Poduty in the News. It has been such a treat getting to chat and share my thoughts and creativity with everyone. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can find me at Sustaining Creativity Podcast on all platforms. I'm on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Amazon, all of them. You can find me there. You can also find me at Sustaining Creativity on all social media, Facebook and Instagram and TikTok, and Mari Reisberg on LinkedIn if you would like to connect with me there. And those are all the places. My podcast, as we talked about earlier, comes out Tuesdays and Fridays now. So we have over 300 episodes for you to go listen to. And each episode is me interviewing a different person from around the world. So definitely go tune in and let me know what your favorite episode is.
Awesome, Mari. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Do you remember what time it was?
Do I remember what time it was? The best time.
What time is it?